Good morning, everyone in the United States, and good afternoon to our friends in Switzerland. My name is Robert Giuffra, and I have the privilege of being the chair of the American Swiss Foundation. And it's a real privilege to have today's speaker, Ambassador Ralf Heckner. Ambassador Heckner is the first young leader to serve as the Swiss ambassador to the United States. We have had Ed McMullen, as folks may remember, was the first young leader to serve as the American ambassador to Switzerland. And I'd like to think now that this has started a real tradition. And one of the prerequisites to becoming an ambassador either to the United States or to Switzerland will be being a young leader. And it's really just another example of the great success of the Young Leaders Program, which was started by the great ambassador, Faith Whittlesey. So, Ambassador, why don't you give us a little bit about your background for everyone?
Yeah, first and foremost, Bob, it's great to be here, and especially with the American Swiss Foundation. I just went through the list of people who are with us in the call. They're great friends from my time as a young leader in 2001, and it is great to be back in Washington D.C. And I give you two.
Well, it's an exciting time to be in Washington, D.C.
Well, it's always exciting to be in Washington, D.C. as a diplomat. This is definitely the place to be. And now things are really happening and changing. So yes, you're right. It's even more exciting than normally, I would say. But the first time I served here was between 2003 and 2007. And I had the privilege to know a number of young leaders. So Jason Forrester was serving in the State Department, and Kimberly Reed was serving in the Treasury Department. Those contacts were incredibly important for me when I started here in Washington. And last week I was in the National Security Council, and everything is new. People don't know where the offices are. So the person that we met with, the senior director, asked another colleague where to find the office, and this person learned that this was the Swiss ambassador and delegation, and said, "I'm a Swiss American Swiss Foundation young leader of last year." So his name is Ugona Edze. This is Impact 2003 when I arrived.
Actually, Ugona worked at Sullivan and Cromwell, so that's really great. I know he's got a job, I think, in the White House counsel's office.
Yeah, so I served between 2003 and 2007 here. That was the time of the Iraq War. I was in charge especially of the Iran file, which was incredibly rewarding because of the fact that we are representing U.S. interests in Iran, and the United States and Iran were neighbors because the United States were physically present in Afghanistan and then in Iraq. So I actually worked for the U.S. State Department quite a bit in that function, and we had small children, and whenever the phone called at 7 o'clock in the evening and I had to go, my daughter just asked one thing: State Department? And I said, yes, that's the State Department. And I was going off, handing over a message either to the American administration or the administration and government of Iran. So great memories from my first time in Washington, D.C., and very happy to be back in D.C. again. It took my wife and me 3 days to feel at home.
Well, you have a beautiful house, and we all look forward to coming to to your residence, which is really one of the most spectacular residences in Washington. It's really in a beautiful view of downtown Washington from the back porch. At the beginning of
it's not my house. It's the Swiss residence, and it is the platform on which we host events and bring our Swiss and American friends together. So it's a great working tool, but it is a beautiful residence to be in and to work with.
Now, the beginning of any new presidential administration in the United States is often a time of a lot of energy. And the people always talk about the first 100 days of a new administration. And clearly, President Trump is certainly engaged in a very energetic activity in the first, I guess, 3 weeks of his presidency. What are the big shifts you see in Washington, D.C. from your first tour, back in 2003, 2007 to now? How have things changed in the States from your perspective?
Well, clearly, the U.S. administration has changed. President Trump is in his second term, and I'm sure we will discuss his policies during this interview. But generally, I mean, I was literally shocked to see the prices in the United States, in Washington, but also elsewhere. So I understood immediately why inflation was one of the big themes of the elections, and I understand also that the U.S. The people of the United States had that as a focal point when going to the ballot box. I visited the south of the United States. I was impressed by the economic dynamism that I saw. I drove from Georgia to Charlotte, and on the left and right side of 85 North, you have one new production site after the other. There's a lot of economic dynamism happening in the South. And here in Washington, what was interesting for me was, compared to my first stint, where the lens through which the U.S. administration under George W. Bush had a look at the world was the war on terrorism. I do feel that China is a bipartisan, overarching policy issue in Washington, D.C. and for the United States, and whatever the former, but also especially also this administration is doing, will be done also by looking through that lens. I would say those are three general points that I would highlight when it comes to what I felt here over the last 5 months, living again in Washington, D.C. and touring a little bit the United States.
When you think about President Trump, people think about him sort of over the last, now probably 12 years as being, involved in politics, but it's easy to sort of forget that his background really was as a business person. Mm-hmm. And his, most famous book was called The Art of the Deal. And I think, he's someone who my sense is very focused on being transactional, whether it's in economics or foreign policy. Given his focus on bilateral deals, what do you think are some of the strategic objectives of Switzerland in the next 4 years?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I would like to highlight that the Federal Council and administration has a positive take when it comes to the incoming administration. Bilaterally, we are looking forward to this administration, also based on the positive track record of the first Trump administration. Now,
I think the president actually came to Switzerland a few times, is my recollection, when he was president.
Yes, he went to Davos, which is an important place to be, because at the beginning of January, the global narrative is being shaped also in Davos during the World Economic Forum. So the president of the United States being there is highly important for that, but also for Switzerland, because that is our opportunity, the opportunity for the Federal Council, the Swiss government, to meet with the president of the United States, and that was done several times. So we are definitely looking forward to Trump participating in the WEF in Davos next year again.
What are some of your strategic
Now,
objectives for Switzerland?
yeah. So I think when it comes to our strategy at this point, a lot is happening, and we have very important and very positive positions. We are the sixth biggest investor to the United States, creating 400,000 well-paid jobs. We are in the sectors that are important for the Trump administration, meaning industrialization, manufacturing. We are doing apprenticeship in the United States, which is geopolitics, because if the United States has a skilled workforce, you can compete with any other bigger competitor. So we have a great position when it comes to investments and our businesses. We are the number one investor in research and development. This is especially because of the pharma businesses that are doing innovation and production here in the US. So the first strategy is keep our good position. And then as the administration of President Trump moves forward, we would like to detect opportunities to strengthen our bilateral relations. And there, I mean, I cannot say at this point what exactly would be an opportunity concretely, but my sense is that, for example, in the space of critical and emerging technologies, there could be an opportunity for Switzerland and the United States to work more strategically together. I think also in the space of pharma and innovation, there are opportunities. But at this point, we need to watch a little bit what the Trump administration is focusing on, and if that is in line with our interest, as I said, with an open mindset towards the Trump administration bilaterally, we will have an interest to take that opportunity and work together with our American friends to get our bilateral relations to the next level.
What do you think can be done to expand trade between the United States and Switzerland? And do you think there's any chance to revive the efforts to have a free trade agreement between the United States and Switzerland? I recall that Ambassador McMullen was a strong proponent of that free trade agreement.
Well, first and foremost, we have our double taxation treaty that needs to go through administration and then Congress. This is one of the most important files because it would mean less taxes for US companies in Switzerland, less taxes for Swiss companies in the United States, and with that, more money to invest bilaterally by those companies. So this will be clearly one of my priorities. The last time it took 10 years to get this double taxation treaty through. Our objective and ambition is clearly to get this new double taxation treaty through as quickly as possible. And then any possibility to engage with the United States bilaterally for our business communities will be welcome. My predecessors had been working on sectorial deals. This is one way of doing it based on the needs of the companies in the US and Switzerland. Are there sectors where we can, in a focused way, eliminate hurdles in trade and investment? Then I served as ambassador to India, and we were able and lucky to wrap up a free trade agreement with India, a quite complicated partner, but we were able to establish a partnership and sign a free trade agreement. And if there is an opportunity here to go for that, and both sides are of the opinion that this is worthwhile, I don't need to be convinced to run with it and give my best to make it happen. But also here we need to see a little bit more what the Trump administration is doing, but my sensors are there in order to detect any positive sign when it comes to more investments and trade in both sides between the US and Switzerland.
You mentioned innovation before, and there's been a lot of talk about the importance of the growing importance of AI. And Switzerland is really known as a country of innovation. How can Swiss and US companies collaborate more closely on AI, quantum computing, and other next-gen technologies?
Yeah. I would start from a broader perspective. I mean, the question is, who is leading globally in AI? Is it the United States or are these other countries? If the United States is leading, then you can have a certain set of policies. And the Biden administration came up with a set of policies when it comes to restricting access to the most modern chips. If this is not the case, that the US is leading by far in the space of artificial intelligence, then in my assessment, a forward strategy would make sense for this government, and that would give us, Switzerland, a great opportunity to work with the United States of America. So I really hope to see an open forward strategy of this government when it comes to AI. I give you an example how Switzerland and the US are working together in AI, and especially the infrastructure of AI, the NVIDIA chips. Those chips were improved on by the ETH in Zurich, the Federal Technical High School in Zurich. So that means the product, the chip of a US company was enhanced and improved by Swiss innovation in Zurich. That's the kind of collaboration that already has happened, and I would like to see much more of that.
You mentioned China at the start of the program, and clearly one of the issues that's arisen is greater scrutiny over supply chain vulnerabilities and the extent to which you mentioned all of the economic development in the southern United States. I mean, clearly the Trump administration wants to increase the US industrial capability and sort of rebuild the so-called US Rust Belt. How do Swiss companies navigate the competing pressures between China on the one hand and then the United States on the other in this increasingly competitive and dynamic world?
I think they're not navigating that space differently than states. As a country, Switzerland, about 20 years back, took the decision to diversify her trade relations. We were mindful of the fact that most of our trade was with Europe. So one strategy was to diversify with the US. And that strategy was great. You're now the number one.
Very smart in retrospect.
And incredibly successful. The United States today is our number one trade partner. When I first served here, I think you were number 5. We also diversified with China. We are now diversifying with Indonesia, with India, Thailand. We have been focusing on a lot of free trade negotiations, and we're able to wrap up all these over the last couple of months. China is older. So this is the diversification strategy of Switzerland. Now, because of a new environment, geopolitical environment, we will have to navigate a triangle. The triangle is Europe, because we are in the middle of Europe. So the European Union is clearly one key focal point. The United States of America as our number one trade partner. We have huge interest in the United States, in investments and innovation, and China. And this is the triangle in which we have to navigate. Now, if I have a look at the United States government, you have that clear bipartisan agreement on China in the US. So this is the lens through which Switzerland needs to see all our activities when it comes to China. But you said it at the beginning, Bob, President Trump is a person that can make deals. I'm not excluding that President Trump might be open for a deal with China. So the answer to your question is that companies are diversifying. Companies are working on resilient logistical chains, the same as countries. And everyone is watching and navigating the space between the US, China, and Europe, if you're a Swiss company or Switzerland as a state.
You mentioned something before, which I think is really important. People forget Richard Nixon was known as a staunch anti-communist, yet he was the person who opened up China. And I think that Donald Trump is someone who is a deal maker, but most importantly is focused on economics. And he might surprise people, as you suggest, in terms of, what approach is taken ultimately to China. And, I think he even invited President Xi to his inauguration. And I think maybe the number 2 person came. Why do you think Switzerland, what is it about Swiss culture and the Swiss people that makes the Swiss so successful? When you look at the other countries in Europe, Germany has issues right now, France has issues. The Swiss always seem to be coming out on top. For a country that is as small as Switzerland is, it punches so much above its weight, to use an expression. Why do you think the Swiss are so successful? Is it that mountaineering mindset, alpine mindset?
Well, I think you said an interesting thing, Bob. We are small, geographically small, and that means Switzerland works like a big city, a big region. People know each other, and that means politicians, business people, researchers. They know each other and they know their strengths, and they can pool their strengths. So small is beautiful when it comes to create an ecosystem where politicians, business people, and researchers are listening to each other, are working with each other. A second point I would say is we are very open when it comes to our business and academic ecosystem. From the beginning in 1848, you had politicians, you had researchers, you had business people that came to Switzerland because we were the only free country and liberal country on the European continent. And that is the same up to today. So the Nestle of the 19th century is now Hayek, for example, with Swatch. So this openness towards the world of our academia, of our businesses, is clearly something that is serving us well. Within Switzerland, you have federalism. It's the same thing as in the United States of America. You have so many opportunities to solve problems thanks to federalism. And you will find even different solutions to the same challenge or problem. And federalism is definitely something that gives Switzerland and the United States a unique possibility to have different perspectives on issues and challenges, finding many good solutions to it. And it also infuses, and that is maybe my last point, competition. There's a competition happening between the cantons. There's a competition happening between the different federal states of the United States of America, and that is very positive. So the competition that we have within Switzerland is good for being competitive abroad as well.
I think one of the other advantages you have in Switzerland that we don't have is I think your politics is a little bit more collaborative than ours. You know, in the US, it's become much more of a zero-sum game. So either you go in one direction or you go in the other direction. And I think the Swiss system is really forces sort of collaboration and consensus in a way that few countries that I'm aware of are able to accomplish.
Yes, but if you have a look at the US, I mean, one takeaway of my first 5 months is it is impressive how the United States can change quickly. I mean, it's a huge country, a lot of people, and nevertheless, this country is capable to change radically. I mean, this whole drive into digitalization, AI, amazing, and well, and you have from different priorities from one administration to another administration, and you can it can go in this direction, then can go back to another direction. But a country of this size that is able and has a system that it can change quickly is amazing. For Switzerland, it is important that we don't that we are careful with what we have. So it's a different approach, and because of our cultural diversity right from the beginning, we are more prone to find a common understanding as a people.
You know, one of the real strengths of Switzerland has been the strong financial sector. And, you know, in past years, your predecessors have really had to focus on issues like Swiss bank secrecy and the like. And obviously, the big development over the last several years has been, you know, the merger of UBS and Credit Suisse. What do you see as the future of the Swiss financial center?
Well, I was talking about changes in the United States. If you have a look at Switzerland's financial center, it is now driven more by insurances than banks. This is a huge shift. And those insurances and reinsurances, reinsurer are all here in the United States. So this is definitely a business that is thriving, a business that is important, and is part and parcel of what we call the financial center. The financial center of Switzerland has seen big shifts. Today, the policy is clear. We would like to see international global standards being applied by all financial centers of this planet. So this is a policy that is totally different than the policy of Switzerland's financial center when I served here for the first time. So they have been huge changes over the years as well. Now the focus in Switzerland is to have a stable financial center and a competitive one. And that is the discussion that is happening, I think, also now in the United States. This government seems to have a look at important issues for financial centers, like the OECD pillars, for example, that is totally different from the US government before. So my answer here to your question would be, again, there are changes happening in Washington, D.C., and we have to be mindful of those changes and then adapt accordingly to the direction that might take. And that will be one of the important factors for the Swiss Financial Center when it comes to the years ahead.
You know, one of the things that I always was kind of looking at back on it, there was always a view that Swiss bank secrecy was critical to the success of the Swiss Financial Center. And that actually hasn't turned out to be the case. I believe that UBS is probably the #1, investment manager in the world. And I think that one of the attractions to Switzerland is the strength of the country and the stability of the country. And that's really one of the cornerstones of the success of the Swiss Financial Center. I mean, when people look around the world, and I imagine if you're in Brazil or you're in Argentina or you're in India, and you have to sort of think about where do you want to put your money, Switzerland has got to be in the top, 1, 2, or 3 countries. And that's a big advantage, I think, for the Swiss financial sector.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's true.
Now let's switch to a topic that's always an interesting one, which is Swiss neutrality. There's the vaunted Swiss neutrality, yet in recent years, particularly following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Switzerland has taken a stronger stance on issues like sanctions. How do you see the Swiss foreign policy evolving during the Trump administration between cooperation on security issues, yet maintaining Swiss neutrality?
I mean, Swiss neutrality has served Switzerland well, but it was also historically in the interest of the states. So in the 19th century, Swiss neutrality was in the interest of the European powers, and those European powers, from Russia to Prussia and UK and France, Austria, were guaranteeing Switzerland's neutrality. Switzerland's neutrality needs to be in the interest of the of the European and international environment, and this is, I think, why the discussion about neutrality in line with the Ukraine war, meaning the Russian war against Ukraine, the second Russian war against Ukraine, has started in Switzerland. This is one component of the discussion that is happening in Switzerland, based on the question whether and for whom internationally Switzerland's neutrality is positive. A second shift or a second debate or point of discussion that I detect is exactly the one that you were referring to. Normally the Swiss are debating neutrality because it is part and parcel of our DNA, and the people are convinced that we should be neutral and remain neutral. But now we have also there a little bit of shift of the discussion from neutrality to security. And that is I think very important because of the unstable and sensible security environment in which Europe finds itself. The Swiss people voted for the F-35 and Patriot Raytheon missile systems already before the second war of Russia against Ukraine. So you see that the security angle of this debate is strong, and I think will get stronger. But this said, we will have an initiative on neutrality, meaning a popular debate and then a popular vote in the not months ahead but years ahead. So this debate is not over. This debate continues. But for me, the positive angle of the debate is that we are very much now focusing on security as a key pillar of Switzerland, and not only on neutrality. It's neutrality and security.
Let me ask, you started your diplomatic career almost 30 years ago. What was the best piece of advice you've received to be a good diplomat?
Well, I received a lot of advice, but the best thing that could happen to me was I had great bosses, including two of my predecessors here. And that's how I could really learn. And the fact to serve as a young diplomat in Washington, D.C., I think this was an amazing school and training camp for me to work with one of the most knowledgeable and impactful administrations and learn from them. So I had two great schools, my bosses and my 4.5 years here in Washington, D.C.
What do you remember about your experience as a young leader during the conference?
I mean, we had great moments. We were flying in a helicopter over Switzerland. We were in one of the finest hotels in Switzerland. So which was definitely too nice for what I had experienced before. But what struck me was the spirit of togetherness. You know, you can pretend stuff, but you cannot pretend enthusiasm, and you cannot pretend friendship. And those were the two things that struck me. There was something bigger than just bilateral relations and bilateral interests, and there was a purpose. There was a purpose enshrined in the American Swiss Foundation, and that purpose is definitely bringing people together, and always in a bipartisan way. We had quite interesting discussions.
One of the takeaways I had, which I think is, I was a young leader in 1995, and years later, it's now 30 years. But whenever I run into someone from my class of young leaders, it's always a big hug. And those relationships really are, it's like, you go to college for 4 years, but 1 week as a young leader, and you sort of have the same strong relationships. And I think that's really one of the great benefits of the program. Do you have any memories of Faith Whittlesey?
Oh, yes. I mean, Faith was incredible. She knew every single person by name. And that was just impressive. I mean, the biggest compliment that you can make to a person is remember it's his or her name. And that was amazing. And you could feel the drive. I miss her a lot.
She was very energetic. And, one of the things that keeps me motivated to keep building the American Swiss Foundation is my, deep affection for Faith, because this really was her legacy. And she really did love Switzerland. And she really thought that Switzerland as a country had so many virtues to it. And I always like to say, we Americans can learn so much from the Swiss, because you all do things, really, it's a great country. And it's in little ways and big ways. I think it's really the envy of the world. Are there any books you're reading right now that you'd recommend to folks on the program?
Yeah. So my son visited me over Christmas, and he actually bought Robert Lighthizer book, No Trade is Free. So I found that this was really a good pick. I read it, and it was incredibly informative. I'm actually now starting to read a book that I bought at the end of my first term here. It's the People's History of the United States by Zinn. So I'm a historian, and I have read a lot about U.S. history, but this is years back, so I need to be more knowledgeable again, because I'm convinced that history is my lens of looking at a country and trying to figure out what is happening. And there's so much happening in the United States. The US is at a turning point, and it's not the first time. And I would like to learn how that was done in the past.
You know, one of the mistakes I think people make when we're living through a moment of what seems like a lot of dynamism is you need to take that longer view of things. And, you know, the country sort of goes in one direction, then it goes in another direction. It sort of moves ultimately toward an equilibrium. And I think that's sort of what we're seeing right now. I mean, I think it'll be an interesting 4 years, and then we'll see what happens, you know, thereafter. But I think, you know, it's hard to imagine a more interesting time to be a Swiss diplomat in the United States than, you know, what you're going to be looking at over the next several years. Any other thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with?
I mean, this is an event with and a discussion with the American Swiss Foundation. People to people relations are incredibly important, and Ambassador Whittlesey felt it. And if I have a look at the last 20 years, I mean, both sides have been investing in broadening our people to people relations. We 25 years back, we founded SwissNex, the Swiss Science House in Boston. We established caucuses in our federal parliament and here at Congress. I have seen what has been done over the last years, broadening our people-to-people relations when it comes to governors, mayors, journalists. So any opportunity to broaden this network of people-to-people relations, that is key, because these are the people that will promote our bilateral relations. These are the people that will run with any initiative that the two governments will be able to shape. And these are also the people that will help us in moments where, there might be a misunderstanding, or we will not read from the same page. And for that reason, the American Swiss Foundation is one of the most important people-to-people institutions, and my objective will be to add more, to strengthen those people-to-people relations with you, but also beyond this. And I'm looking forward to be part of your next endeavors in New York or in Switzerland in June.
Yeah, we have two great events that the ambassador will be coming. This is the advertising portion of the program. He'll be joining us for our annual gala, which will honor Nestle's CEO. That'll be May 8th at the Harvard Club in New York City. And then we're having our annual leadership summit at the Swiss Re Conference Center in Rouchlacon on June 3rd and 4th, and the ambassador will be there. And, you know, the thing I really feel most proud of is I think Ambassador Whittlesey is smiling. She really, you know, created this organization, really built it, along with people like Shelby Cullom-Davis and Ambassador Shelby Cullom-Davis. And I think it's really, we're in a strong position now. And I think, as you point out, we have 1,500 young leaders. And these are, you know, you're walking around in the West Wing of the White House and you run into a young leader under President Biden. The head of the National Economic Council was a young leader. And, you know, we pick our young leaders very carefully, and it's sort of like you plant a seed and it grows, and it really strengthens the relationships between Switzerland and the United States. And I can't really thank you enough for participating. And we're so proud of you being the first young leader to serve as the Swiss ambassador to the United States and ambassador. We look forward to seeing you again soon, and really thank you so much for participating in our program today.
No, thank you, Bob, and the American Swiss Foundation for having me here and giving me this platform. And we have a plan, Bob, that all future ambassadors need to be young leaders too.
I fully support the plan, and I feel the same way about on the U.S. side as well. So it should be a prerequisite. And thank you all very much for watching us today. And Ambassador, thank you, and we know you'll be a great ambassador. And we look forward to greater collaboration between the United States and Switzerland. So thank you all very much, and everyone have a great day.